All right, let's get to part 2 of geometry, naming, labeling, and symbols. Here we have a table that shows us several of the symbols that we use for geometry. The first one, a lowercase m and an angle symbol, means the measure. So that's how many degrees an angle measures. For example, the measure of angle ABC equals 32 degrees. The next one looks like an equal sign with a squiggle over the top. That's our symbol for congruent. We talked the other day about congruent meaning the same exact measure. So line segment EF is congruent to line segment MN, and that means segments EF and MN are the exact same length. Next, we have what looks like two L's side by side. That's our symbol for parallel. You notice here that the two L's in parallel and the symbol here looks a lot the same. That's how I remember that means parallel. It means they have the same slope, they never intersect, and we could write that line RS is parallel to line LQ. Our next symbol that looks like an upside down T, it stands for perpendicular. In the T, that actually makes a right angle. So that tells us that is perpendicular. It intersects at a 90-degree angle, just like that symbol here. They intersect at a 90-degree angle. So we could say line AB is perpendicular to line XY. On the next line here, we have two lines with arrows marked on the lines themselves. That's another way to write parallel. So you might see a figure, and instead of saying line RS is parallel to line LQ, they might instead have two arrows, one little arrow in the middle of line RS and one arrow in the middle of line LQ, and that tells us that they are parallel. So they never intersect, and you would write that exactly the same way that we did above. So line RS is parallel to line LQ. Lastly, we have a box in our angle here. And in that box means that it is a right angle, measuring exactly 90 degrees. So if we have a picture of an angle with vertex A, with a box in that angle measure, that means that the measure of angle A is exactly 90 degrees. Now, sometimes we have figures and we want to make marks on the figure to let us know that certain things are congruent. For segments, we use tick marks to indicate segments of the same length. For angles, we use arcs. So let's take a look at an example here. First, it tells us we need to mark that segment QR is congruent to segment TS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tick mark on QR. And I'll put the one here in red to show. I'm going to use my tick marks in red. That's going to let us see these a little bit differently here too. So I have a tick mark here on QR, and I need to put another one on TS. And I use exactly the same number of tick marks on both of those segments. That tells us by looking at the picture that those two lengths are the same. Then I also want to mark QT. Segment QT is congruent to segment RS. I've already used one tick mark. If I do one tick mark again, that's going to say that QT and QR are the same, but it's not. We don't know that. So we have to use two tick marks. And I do the same thing on RS. So two tick marks on QT, two tick marks on RS, and that says that QT and RS are the same length. For angles, we use arcs. So we're going to put the arcs here in blue. Angle Q, so I'm going to put one arc, is congruent to angle S, and that's also going to have one arc. We have angle T is congruent to angle R, and we're going to put that one in purple. So I already used one arc, so if I put one arc at T, that's going to say T and Q are the same, and they're not. So for T, I'm going to put two arcs. That tells me it's different than angles Q and S. Then I'm going to put two arcs for R to show that it's the same as T and not the same as Q and S. So here we have our figure marked with QR and TS congruent segments QT and segments RS congruent, angle Q congruent to angle S, angle T congruent to angle R. All right, we are all done with today's lesson. Now let's practice.